Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listener. It is Tuesday, June 1st, my second episode. I'm on my way home from the library today. I just recorded the top of the stack episode for today. Now I'm recording the episode for Thursday, so you'll hear this in a couple days. This is Shooting from the Hip Triple Shot. So, kind of depressingly, I was scheduled to record and release this episode last week. I, in fact, did walk around and give you all my thoughts on these games. And then I got home and realized I'd forgotten to press record. Why? Why would I forget to press record? I don't understand. Dang. Really infuriating. Nonetheless, that means you get my refined thoughts on these three games because this will be the second time I'm giving you my off-the-cuff response to initial plays of these games. For those of you new to the podcast, I've just described the Shooting from the Hip episode in which I give you short analysis of three games I've played recently for the first time. So here we go. First game I want to talk about is Super Skill Pinball. I purchased and played this as part of the ongoing Toggle online game series, of which we now have two remaining sessions. We have one today on June 1st, and we have one on June 8th. As of June 15th, we will be back to meeting in person. Huzzah! But in the meantime, so we're for Tuesday, June 1st, we are going to be playing Cryptid. But last week, May 25th, we played Super Skill Pinball. Super Skill Pinball is a roll and write game from Jeff Engelstein, published by WizKids. It's gotten quite a bit of buzz over the last 6 months. Shut Up and Sit Down did a nice review of it, and a number of other companies or a number of other reviewers have talked in pretty glowing terms. So I thought I would give it a try. At its heart, this is a solo game. You don't really need to play with other people at all. You can all play at the same time, but there is zero player interaction, at least in the base game. I haven't played. The game comes with four different pinball boards. I've only played the first one, so it's possible that in the later ones there is somehow some interaction, but I would be kind of doubtful that. Usually pinball is a solitary activity, so I don't know how it would manage to have stay thematic and have interaction, but there it is. So in that regard, I got to play the circus-themed pinball game, which was called Carnival. It has a clown face on it and the colors to make it look like a circus. So the way the game works is you have a token that represents the pinball itself. It looks like a tiny little pinball that's been sawed in half, so it sits on the board with a kind of rounded surface. And you move it around the board, moving it from obstacle to obstacle in zones down the table. At the top of so the table is divided into three or four. It's 4 zones in the Carnival one. And each turn, unless something happens that prevents it, you move it down one zone. Then you roll the dice, and the dice let you... Actually, you don't move it down first. You have it where it is. You roll the dice, and then the dice decide where the ball can go. You usually have 2 dice, and you're going to pick one of the 2 and use that to check off some element of the board. Now, there are a variety of different things, but basically just as you check off different elements, you complete sort of mini goals. It's like a set collection element, which gets you bonuses, which then lets you do other things like have multi-ball, where you have another ball in play at the same time, in which case you have to use both dice every turn. You're constantly sort of struggling with how to keep the ball from dropping down by managing the number of little dice spots that you have to tick off on the flippers. And over time you get, hopefully better at the game. There's a significant amount of luck involved, but it's pretty fun. I really liked the feel of this game as much as it did not feel like pinball, because you're not using your hand-eye coordination, your reaction time very well. It still felt like pinball, just because of the way that your resources get used, the way the bonuses get deployed, the theme of it, the components, the clever little bit about this metal-looking, silver half pinball thing looks really good. So the variety of elements that go into play to make the game work really nice are excellent. I also really like the idea, it's played with a whiteboard, and the reason for that is that you are going to be erasing things a lot. So at the beginning of the game, everything is not filled in, and there are 3 different kinds of things you would check off. There are double solid border things, there are single solid border things, and then there are things with a dotted line around them. The double border and the single border things are permanent when you mark them off, and then the dotted line thing gets reset when you lose your pinball. Now if you complete a set, so like you have the 3 bumpers at the top, if you get all 3 of the bumpers at the top, then you also get to erase those 3 bumpers and reset them as well after getting the bonus. So, I don't know, it has a nice rhythm and flow that feels like pinball to a degree. And like I said, there are 4 different boards that you can play, each with a different set of rules. So that is Super Skill Pinball 4cade from Jeff Engelstein and WizKids Games. All right, the second game I want to talk about today, I have not played in person. I've seen a copy. One of my friends has a copy in person. But it's a game that I want to play, or that I played over Tabletop Simulator with my friends over at the Forgot My Dice podcast. That's Robert and Jonathan, and then Ray, one of the regular listeners over there, also played with us. And this was Tidal Blades. Tidal Blades is a game from, I think, Ben and Tim Eisner, if I'm correct, and with art from Mr. Cuddington. The art in the game is lovely. It's great world building, and the characters all have a kind of vibrancy and delight to them that makes for a really interesting experience. The game components I can't really speak to, having not played with them, but like I said, a friend of mine has a copy, so I did get to examine it, and it's very well made. Lots of snazzy dice, these cool attribute trackers that they make for the characters that have 4 dials on them that work really nice. And like I said, the art is beautiful. So the idea of this game is that you are part of an elite group of warriors designed to protect your community from the villainous enemies who come to destroy it or something. And the way that you do that is by being named a Tidal Blade. A Tidal Blade is, I guess, the head of the warriors or the super duper fighters or whatever. In the game, you are potential Tidal Blades, and you're fighting in these arenas for the chance to be named Tidal Blade, I guess. In gameplay, it's a little bit, it has the feel of Lords of Waterdeep. It does not have the additional spaces where everybody can go, the buildings, which are such a neat part of Lords of Waterdeep, but it does have the gather the resources you need and then spend them to complete quests element of the game, which is what, like I said, what begs that comparison. Now, one of the challenges of that game is that while Lords of Waterdeep, you can collect the resources and then you complete the challenges. Boom, done. In Tidal Blades, you collect the resources by means of gathering dice, and then you tackle the challenge, and in tackling the challenge, you roll dice to try to complete it. Now, you have the 3 dice, you have the however many dice you're using in your challenge, and the dice are all of different types as well. And then you have this danger die that you have to roll that gets more difficult with each round. So there are 4 rounds, I think, and maybe 5 rounds. And the danger die changes with each one. There could be 7 rounds. I might be mistaken on how many rounds there were. But the idea is that there are 3 different danger dice that go up in difficulty as you play, and the harder danger dice makes it harder to roll your dice. The way it works is when you want to complete a challenge, you roll some dice, you match symbols on the dice to symbols on the challenge card. Anytime you roll a danger die, if you have some shells to spend, you spend the shells on this shield card, and then you can ignore the danger die results. If you don't have shells to spend, then you lose your dice, and they're gone permanently. So they're gone from your collection. You have to get new dice rather than just being like out for the round or something. So it's pretty punishing to lose dice, which means you have to spend a lot of time making sure you have enough shells to do what you want to do. And if you have enough shells to do what you want to do, then it doesn't really feel that challenging to roll the dice, because you're always going to be able to fend off the danger by using the shells. In addition, if you fail a mission, the penalty is you have to discard that mission card and you draw a new one. So the penalty is really not all that aggressive or not all that significant, which leads me to my assessment of the game. While I have your ear, I did want to mention 2 things. First off, I am helping to run the XYZ Quarks Game Design Challenge. Quarks is a series of pocket games being introduced by XYZ Game Labs, And the design challenge is set up as a competition first to see what kinds of cool designs the board game design community can come up with, but also as a way to solicit potential designs for season 2 of Quarks, which we expect to bring out, presuming season 1 does reasonably well. So the idea is that they are games that you can teach in 3 minutes and play in 30. If you're interested in submitting a game for the contest, and they have to fit in a pretty small footprint, in a pretty small box, but you can find all those details over at xyzgamelabs/QDC, as in Quarks Design Challenge. That's QDC. That contest runs through July 31st. Now, if you think that Quarks sound interesting, have I got a deal for you. Starting June 8th and running for several weeks, I don't know the exact end date right now, we over at XYZ Game Labs, I'm helping out there, are going to be running a Kickstarter for season 1 of the Quarks games. Now, we already published one, that's Zoo Year's Eve. It came out at PAX a year ago, and it's quite a nice little game about zoo animals trying to sneak into the zookeeper's party. But then we also have 2 more games on the way. That is Bait and Switch, which is a game about heist in which the burglars are sort of working together to steal loot and then working against one another to try to get the most loot. And then we have a nice little card-laying game called Cultivate, in which you're building a garden of succulents and trying to keep those pesky bugs off of your garden. All 3 games are a delight. Like I said, they play quickly, they're easy to learn. They come in these cute little pocket-sized boxes, which you will be able to take with you wherever you like. And it's a rugged plastic that'll keep your games from getting dinged up. So if you're interested in those, go to, I guess, probably xyzgamelabs.com/quarks, or I suspect on the front page we'll have a link to the Kickstarter. If you look in the show notes for this podcast, we'll have a link there as well. That will be coming June 8th. Hope to see you there. Tidal Blades is an interesting experience. They do have one really neat mechanism, which is the 4 attributes that you have, that you track. And each time you use the attribute to complete a challenge, then you raise these little dials. And as the dials go up, your character becomes stronger in that attribute. And then you are able to complete more difficult challenges, but also each attribute gives you a skill of some sort. So one of the attributes determines how many dice you can roll in a challenge. One of the other attributes determines how many bonus powers you can get, etc., etc. One of them determines how many dice you can refresh. When you use a die, it goes into your spent die pool, and you can only get it back by refreshing, which is an action, or at the end of the round, you get 1 free refresh. So the higher your refresh die total is, the more dice you get back. So that is a really neat element. It challenges you to use the different elements as you roll so that you can raise up your stats in those skills. That part I like. However, the resolving the challenges never felt difficult to me because we had to spend a lot of... You always want to make sure you had enough shells that you didn't lose your dice. And once you have enough shells to complete the challenge, then it's not a challenge to complete the challenge anymore. So that part was really not as fulfilling as I would like. As you could tell probably from me explaining the theme, I didn't really understand the theme, or the theme did not come together for me very dramatically. So then it does become mechanical. So even as we have an explanation and a name for all these things we're doing, at the heart of it, it felt like solving these mechanical puzzles. And in the end, I would just rather play Lords of Waterdeep. Like, I did not think that the extra things that this game added on top of the challenges from Lords of Waterdeep, added to the game. I felt like it was just kind of busy work. So all in all, Tidal Blades not my favorite. I would play it again if somebody had it and was interested in playing it. I did enjoy my experience with it and had fun in the time with my friends, but I am certainly glad I did not back it myself, and I won't miss it if it doesn't come out while I'm at game day again. That's Tidal Blades. I think the subtitle might be Heroes of the Reef, but don't quote me on that. The third game I want to talk about today is Ginkgopolis. Ginkgopolis is a game from Javier Jorge, and if I was complaining about Tidal Blades' lack of theme, Ginkgopolis, whoa buddy, is the theme on this game pale. So ostensibly the idea is in the future, we've destroyed the earth through our rapacious use of resources and debilitating treatment of the environment. And so the only thing we can do now to build cities is build them with ginkgo trees somehow. I'm not clear why ginkgo trees are the resource of choice, but that's how the game is framed. So our job is to build them with ginkgo trees, and we do that. It's a tile manipulation game, and it's a really good tile manipulation game. This is Like I said, I've only played it once, so it's hard to tell how good it's going to be in the long run. But overall, really interesting stuff that's going to be, I think, well worth your time if you get a chance to play. The two things that led me to pick up this game were Blue Peg, Pink Peg gave it a really good rating. And generally, like if they don't like a game, it's going to be hit and miss for me. Sometimes I do really like games that they didn't care for. But it's pretty rare that they really like a game and I'm not super into it. So, having heard their analysis of the game, I decided to pick it up. But because the second thing is, this is one of those games that for a long time was a grail game for people. People have been crazy for this game for a while. Before the reprint, it was getting a lot of money on Board Game Geek or Amazon or eBay, if you could find a copy. And so after the reprint, I found it for a modest price from Miniature Market, and I said, hey, I gotta get that. So, what is Ginkgopolis? In this game, it is a tile laying game with multiple considerations and scoring conditions. This is one of my favorite things in board games. You know, this game is not at all like Calico, but in Calico you have multiple threads of decision making pulling on your brain at any one moment, and that's what's going on in Ginkgopolis. So in Ginkgopolis, you have a number of cards in your hand, and you have three resources. You have ginkgo leaves, which are money. You have resources, which are just these little octagonal cube or octagonal tokens. And then you have tiles. And the tiles are numbered and they have pictures on them, depictions of the buildings you're building. And each building has one of three types associated with one of the three resources, either tiles or resources or money. Then you have these cards, and the cards either let you expand the city outward or build up on top of the city. If you're expanding the city outward, then you place one of the tiles from your hand next to other tiles, and you put one of your resources on it. If you're expanding the city upward, then you put your tile on top of another tile, and you have to spend a certain number of resources based on a variety of factors. What you're trying to do is get areas in the city where a bunch of tiles of the same color are interconnected, and then the person who has the most resources on those interconnected areas will score big points at the end of the game for doing so. So in that sense, it's an area control game. But what makes it really fascinating is the way that you get your resources to continue this engine. Whenever you build out in the city, you get to get resources based on the tiles around where you build. So if you can place a tile strategically, then you gain resources. Whenever you build on top of the city, you don't get to get resources out of the city, but instead you get to keep the card that you used to build. In the first half of the game, some of the cards in the game, the cards that you use to build, give you bonuses for whenever you use a particular action. So maybe you get a bonus for building on top of buildings, you get extra resources, or you get a bonus for expanding. But then on the other side of things, as the game goes on later, when you're playing the later cards, then when you build on top of a building, you get scoring conditions. So you might get something that lets you score points for a variety of things. So like Red Rising, or before that Fantasy Realms, these are games where there's a variety of different scoring conditions. You never know which ones are going to be in play. I guess Terraforming Mars did this with the achievements. And so there's a variety of different elements where you're deciding which things are going to score, and you're constantly weighing your need to continue getting resources so that you can play your cards with your need to build up a scoring engine. In that way, the same delicious tension exists in the Isle of Cats, which I talked about a couple episodes ago, as having this cool push and pull. So the result is you have a very tactical game. There is some level of strategy, but because you're constantly drawing new tiles and you're always getting new cards, you never really know what you're going to have available to you from turn to turn. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention, when you play your cards, you play a card, each person play a card, and then the rest of the cards that you didn't play, you hand to the next player over, and you get the cards that they didn't play. So you'll have 3 cards, you play 1, you pass the other 2 along, then you get 2 from another player, and you draw 1 back up, so you have 3. So you're always getting 1 fresh card. But there's this delicious tension where if you have 2 cards that you know your opponent to your right would need, then you have to decide which one am I going to use, because they're going to have the other one. And your opponent has that same, or your opponent or opponents have that same trouble trying to decide how to deal with you. So as a result, Ginkgopolis, despite its very poor theming, is a really interesting game that's really fun. and I think worthy of deeper exploration for you and your gaming companions if you get a chance. That's Ginkgopolis from Javier George. I regret that I did not notice the name of the publisher. So what games have you been playing lately? Pop over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let me know. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye. Well, if you hear the weird noise in the background, you have encountered the system test for the local tornado alarm, which goes apparently at 10 a.m. Tuesday morning, the first Tuesday of the month. I did not know that when I set out, but it's going to make for an interesting background for this already jinxed recording, which I'm not going to start over because I've already recorded this once. Arrgh.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.